Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where we recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today's the 27th of September, 2023. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So today we have some updates around the ETFs, so the Bitcoin ETFs. Now the first update comes that I don't have the tab actually open here, but it comes out of the SEC, of course. They have, I believe, denied, so here's the tweet here. So they haven't denied ETFs, sorry, they've delayed a couple of ETFs. So they delayed the ARK Invest and 21 shares Bitcoin ETF filing, and these ETFs weren't due for a decision until November 11th. So they've done an early delay here. And James speculates here that, will the other ETFs be delayed in the same way? And then I think that there was a bit more speculation that the reason why the SEC is doing this is because there could be a possible US government shutdown on October 1st, so they want to get ahead of that. But as I said, this is a delay, not a denial, so it's not really anything unexpected, but I think that the early delay is unexpected. But as I said, it could be because of that looming government shutdown there. Now, another thing that is related to this was a letter that a group of Democratic and Republican lawmakers sent to Gary Gensler to basically tell him to approve a spot Bitcoin ETF. And you can see the letter here. It's quite short. It's basically just saying, hey Gary, approve the ETF. There's no reason not to approve it. And they cited the recent loss that the SEC suffered in the Grayscale case. But this was put forward by, as I said, both Republican and Democratic lawmakers here. So some familiar names here, like Tom Emmer on the Republican side and Richie Torres on the Democratic side. They've been outspoken people in Congress for, pro-crypto people, which has been nice to see. But yeah, those are the two kind of like biggest updates today. And James also speculated that maybe these delays were because of this letter, but I don't think so. I think maybe the more likely thing is that it's because of the potential government shutdown. But also today, happening in, I guess, like about an hour from when I'm recording this, and you'll probably already have seen any news that came out of this before you watch the refuel, Gary Gensler is going before the House Financial Services Committee to basically have a chat, I guess is how you can put it. His testimony is already out. It's more of the same from him. I read it. There's literally nothing in there that's surprising around crypto. It's not just around crypto, of course. It's around basically everything the SEC does, but with a focus on crypto and AI as well. AI has become a big thing for them, obviously, because that's the, I guess, new narrative, right now, has been over the last few months at least. But when it comes to crypto, I think the one thing that kind of stood out to me, and I may be reading this wrong, but the one thing that stood out to me was that in the actual testimony, there is a sentence where Gensler says, the vast majority of crypto tokens likely meet the investment contract test, aka he thinks that the vast majority of crypto tokens are likely securities. Now, this is, at least from what I can tell, different wording to some of the wording he's used in the past, where he's basically said that he thinks everything except Bitcoin is a security. So for him to say the vast majority of crypto tokens likely are a security, that is a shift in language to me. Now, as I said, I'm not 100% confident on if this is an actual shift, or maybe I've just missed it in the past, but reading through the testimony, that's what caught my eye the most. And this shift in language may be due to the fact that the SEC has been losing in court. They're not going to win a lot of cases, especially against bigger players. If they, for example, if they went after another big market cap player directly, like they did with Ripple, it's highly likely that they would lose if that player decided to take them to court, right? So for them to say the vast majority of crypto tokens, or for Gensler to say the vast majority of crypto tokens he considers to be securities, I mean, that's an open-ended thing, right? Because when you say everything except Bitcoin is a security, that's a defined thing. You can literally say that, okay, well, everything except Bitcoin is a security. But when he says the vast majority of crypto tokens, I mean, there are literally millions of tokens, guys, and most of them are completely worthless. So by saying this, it leaves a lot to, it presents a lot of ambiguity and basically leaves Gensler with a lot of wiggle room in the way he basically approaches this whole thing. So yeah, that's just a shift in language that I noticed there, but we'll have to see if that actually amounts to anything. We'll have to see on the on the live stream today, when Gensler fronts the committee, whether they press him hard on certain things like, does he still think ETH is a security? When is he going to approve the Bitcoin ETFs? He's probably going to dodge these questions, to be fair, but I think his body language is definitely something that's very telling. I remember when he, I don't know if it was before the House Financial Services Committee or another committee a few months ago, they pressed him and they asked him, does he think ETH is a security? And he would just dodge the question, right? He wouldn't answer it, but his body language did all the talking. He basically was shaking. He was taken aback by how hard they were pressing him on this. And the fact that he didn't give a straight answer means that even if he believes personally that it's a security, he knows that the SEC would not be successful in trying to classify ETH as a security, and they probably wouldn't even be successful in trying to classify the ETH ICO as a securities offering, right? So when you take it holistically like that, it does seem that there's a bit of a shift here. There's a bit of a softening here, but we'll have to see how that kind of shakes out there. But those are the latest updates. Haven't got any more updates around the ETF so far, but obviously we'll keep you guys updated on anything new that comes across. An interesting tweet that I came across today from ETHWave was, I believe he's using data from Etherscan here to make this Sankey diagram, but it's basically a breakdown of who owns what ETH, whether they be entities or individuals. And as you can see here, the total ETH supply is pretty distributed. You can see that a lot of it is staked right now. And that's in the blue here. I think we're over 20. I don't know if we're at 20% of all ETH staked. We might be pretty close to 20% of all ETH staked. And then that is actually split up into obviously many different entities. Lido being the biggest, but Lido is 33% or almost 33%. So still another 67% belong to other entities which are listed here, and you can see that broken down. But also outside of staking, you have contracts like WETH or Wrapped ETH, obviously holding a lot of ETH. You got all the centralized exchanges, and the thing is about this is that the Wrapped ETH, that's not owned by just one person, right? It's owned by many, many different individuals who have wrapped their ETH and then that are holding Wrapped ETH. And then the same goes for centralized exchange addresses. That is not the centralized exchange's ETH, right? That belongs to their users. Now, of course, they control the keys. And there's that old adage of not your keys, not your coins. But for all intents and purposes, the coins legally belong to the users, right? So it's not like the exchanges own those coins and have legal kind of legal ownership of them. And then you can see here some ICO wallets, and I spotted the Polkadot multi-sig here, which is a frozen fund. So all of the ETH in that contract, it's about 300,000 ETH, is actually frozen. And if you want to know why, you should look it up. You should look up just Polkadot multi-sig, or sorry, I should say parity multi-sig bug. There were two bugs that happened in 2017. I think both of them happened in. And you should just Google that if you want to learn more about that. And then, yeah, you could see more of a breakdown here. But this is not exhaustive, of course, and ETHWave mentions that they didn't include Wrapped ETH in L2, and that's separate. And obviously there are a lot of different entities that aren't included here, but given this is just like an incomplete snapshot, you can still see just how distributed ETH is, and that's thanks in large part to the fact that there is so much to do with your ETH, right? Like I often talk about this when it comes to other layer 1 proof of stake chains, where a lot of the supply is staked. And it's not staked in LSTs, it's actually just staked, right? And it's a different kind of staking compared to Ethereum proof of stake, but some of them have like 70 to 80% of their total supply staked. That's because there's literally nothing else to do with those tokens. There is no DeFi ecosystem, there is no NFT ecosystem, it's not used as money, it's not really used as a store of value or anything like that. You're literally just buying it and delegating it, delegating the stake to a validator in order not to be diluted by the quite high, relatively high issuance rate that these networks have, and also because they advertise things like, we have 5-6% yield on your token. Never mind the fact that the token's down 90+%, right? But yeah, when it comes to ETH, it's completely different. Where, as I said, we're not even at 20% of the total ETH supply staked right now, but ETH is being used in so many other places, and this is just vanilla ETH. This is not counting the LSTs from what I know. So when you look at it like that, very, very bullish distribution overall. But I'll link this in the YouTube description below, and you can go check it out for yourself. All right, we have an update out of the EF Ecosystem Support Program today. So they've announced the data collection grants for 2023. So I think I covered this when they kind of first announced it, but essentially the applications are now open. So you have 4 weeks from September 25th to October 23rd to apply, and this is for grants given to people that are working on anything data related within the Ethereum ecosystem. So you can see here the eligibility criteria is that individuals, teams, or organizations can apply. Obviously, newcomers to Ethereum or anyone, any area of expertise can apply. But really, the projects should be centered around essentially data collection, right? And things like that, and making the most impact. And you can actually see some of the ideas that have been put here by the EF. They say data collection or plugins and visuals for existing data pipelines, updating home pages, fork monitors, DVT testing, and more. So if that sounds like something that you're interested in applying for a grant for, you should definitely go check this out. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. All right, so Blocknative have announced that they are going to be shutting down their MEV Boost Relay and their block builder. So I've talked about Blocknative's relayer before in the context of which relays censor and which relays don't censor. So Blocknative's was a censoring one because they are a US-based company, of course, and you can actually see here on MEV Watch what their market share kind of looks like on the relayer front of things. So it was around 4 to 5%, and I mean, that's over the last day. If I go to the last 30 days, you can probably get a better picture of what it kind of looked like over the longer term if it wants to actually load on the website. But I think it never went above 10% or something like that. Yeah, you can see here it's about 9% over the last 30 days that Blocknative had here. And as I said, they are a censoring relayer, but they have decided to shut that down, as well as their builder. Their builder had a very small market share. Actually, you can actually see here in the over the last 7 days in the builder leaderboard. I believe if I actually search for it here, I'm just quickly looking here. Yeah, so they are the 7th top builder, but that still means they've only got like, I think 1%. Yeah, 1% market share here. So oh no, sorry, that's Bloxroute. This is Blocknative here. It's the same thing. About 1% market share on the builder front, which in my experience isn't enough to be profitable and that isn't actually worth it, because you can see here the top 5 builders account for the majority of the market share, as I discussed yesterday. So I believe that the reason they're shutting down their relayer and their builder is because it just doesn't make economic sense for them to continue to run it. And that's especially true when it comes to relayers. Relayers don't make any money. They are just a money sink, to be honest, to run them. And really it's just run out of altruism here a lot of the time. And this is another reason why relays are something that we're trying to get rid of in the Ethereum ecosystem with PBS. But yeah, Blocknative is shutting theirs down. So if you are running it, be sure to remove it from your list and just obviously leave the other ones that you have in there. If you're a solo staker in Rocket Pool, in the Smart Node stack, you can remove it there. And then obviously all the big staking providers will probably remove it as well from there. And when it comes to the builder that they've been doing, as I said, it's probably unprofitable as well. So they just, I guess this is a business decision for them, where they're basically saying, well, it doesn't make economic sense for us to run these things. We're going to shut them down and let other people do it here. And it's funny because when it comes to the builder market, I really do wonder what this ends up looking like over the long term. Like, do we just get extreme concentration or centralization of builders where it's already pretty extreme right now, but does it end up with like the top 2 builders having the majority of the market share, having like, 80% of the market share or something like that? Or does it continue being like 5 as we see today, or does it get even more distributed when we implement things like inclusion lists? I don't know what that's going to look like. But as I've mentioned before, builders being centralized isn't that big of a deal once we have kind of things like inclusion lists in place to ensure censorship resistance and stuff like that. And for those of you who don't know, I think I linked the inclusion list thing in yesterday's episode, but just a TLDR on how that works. It's basically shifting the power away from builders and relayers to the validator again. Because as I showed yesterday on the censorship.pix website, if you actually look at who's actually doing the censoring as part of the transaction building pipeline, once I load up I'm just loading up the censorship.pix website here, you can actually see that validators are not, right? 94% of validators are non-censoring, whereas you can see here almost 70% of builders are censoring. So with inclusion lists, we basically make it so that validators have the power again, and because almost 94% of validators aren't censoring, we basically get to 94% non-censoring on the network, regardless of what the relayers and builders are preferencing here, which is obviously incredibly bullish. But people will obviously argue against that and say, well, what if the validators just start censoring on their own? What can we do about that? Well, the point is that the validators are actually much more distributed and much more decentralized than both the relays and builders. As I just showed you, we've only got 5 builders that have the majority of the market share, right? And then when it comes to relays, with Blocknative shutting down, we have like 9 relays or something like that, with half of them or almost half of them censoring. I think, actually there'll be 3 out of the 8 here. So yeah, it'll be like almost half of them censoring. Whereas when it comes to validators, even though, if you go to rated.network, even though you see here on rated.network, obviously Lido is almost 33%, you have to actually look at the node operators themselves. So the ones actually running the validators. For Lido, it's currently 31 entities running the nodes, right? Running the actual validators, I should say, as node operators. Then you have Coinbase, obviously one entity, Binance, Kraken, Rocket Pool, and then the long tail from there. So it's much more distributed than relays and builders. Even if you just look at the top kind of like 5 here, Rocket Pool's in the top 5 of staking entities, and that has over, I believe, 3,000 node operators or something like that, or something crazy. So it has a lot of individuals, and then you have Lido at 31. That's going to increase over time, hopefully, as well. And then you go down, and you can just go down to the long tail, and you see kind of what that looks like there. So that's why things like inclusion lists are so bullish for censorship resistance on the network, is because of the fact that we give power back to the validators rather than concentrating it in these relays and builders. And of course, through the longer term roadmap, we have things like MEV burn and PBS to deal with. Now, PBS deals with the relays from my knowledge, and MEV burn also deals with the builders and makes it even more illogical and non-profitable for builders to censor. And it just takes power away from them. So really, the whole kind of roadmap there and the censorship-resistant roadmap of Ethereum to increase the censorship resistance and to eliminate the negative externalities of MEV is to just take power away from these centralized points of failure, such as relays and builders. And that's why, as I've said before, it's actually not a big deal if the builder market stays centralized, because as long as they've got no power over what gets included in the network, and all they're doing is just building the block and extracting a little bit of profit from that, because that's what they're specialized to do, then it's a-okay, basically, right? So yeah, anyway, I talked a lot about this yesterday, so I'm not going to rehash it here. But one other thing on censorship that I wanted to talk about was this nice little visualization that Data always put out, where they said inclusion delays for all transactions versus Tornado Cash transactions in the first 3 weeks of September. There's probably some gas price noise, but there certainly are transactions being delayed by a minute or more due to censorship. So this is what I've said before about how you can still get your Tornado Cash transaction in, but it's going to take you more than one block to do it, because of the fact that like almost 70% of the builders are censoring right now. And then of the relays, it's like 35% are censoring. So you can see here the top shows public mempool transaction inclusion time. So this is all transactions that are included except Tornado Cash related transactions, right? And those are mostly included within 1 to 2 blocks. You can see that the vast majority is included in 1 block, which is 12 seconds. And then there's like a bit of a long tail in the second block, which is another 12 seconds. So within 24 seconds, everything is included. Whereas if you look at the bottom chart here, you can actually see the Tornado Cash withdrawal inclusion times, much different picture here. A very different picture here, I should say. You can see that some of them can take up to 144 seconds to be confirmed here, which is obviously multiple blocks. You can see here it's about, I believe, 12 blocks for it to be confirmed here. Still, obviously not that long, but it's just over 2 minutes, right, in order to get your transaction included in the worst case scenario. But if you look at the bulk of it, really it's within the first minute. Most of them will be confirmed here. So yes, there is a negative kind of like consequence here of delayed inclusion. But the thing is, and I think the important point is that your transaction is still included, right? The Ethereum is still censorship resistant. It's not censorship proof, and it's never claimed to be censorship proof. No blockchain, I believe, out there is censorship proof today. But it is still censorship resistant. And you can see even that at least, I believe, half of the transactions get confirmed within the first 2 blocks, which is obviously not, as Data always says, they actually said another tweet that they put out where it's like, it's not bad, but not ideal sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, that's the best way to put it, right? It's not necessarily, bad, but it's not ideal. And we're going to obviously move the needle more and more to the fact of non-censoring. And that's what we want to see on the network there. And just one last thing on the censorship stuff. This GitHub repository, I may have mentioned it on the refill before, but this repository was created by Justin Drake, and it actually tracks all of the OFAC sanctioned Ethereum addresses. And it may be surprising for you guys to know this, but Tornado Cash is just one entity in a long list of entities that have been sanctioned by OFAC. And you can actually see all the entities that have been sanctioned here, and they're listed out along with the addresses that have been sanctioned themselves. So it's not just Tornado Cash. Obviously, Tornado Cash is the, I believe, the only entity that was code that was sanctioned. The rest of these are actual individuals or organizations that were sanctioned. But yeah, you can go check this out for yourself. It's got links to all the relevant stuff that you need there. And I should say this is also maintained by Tony, the person who maintains the MEVBoost.pix website and the censorship.pix website that I've talked about a lot on the refuel before. But yeah, I'll link this in the YouTube description below for you to go check out. All right, moving on. Brendan Malone here from Paradigm shared a tweet thread that Paradigm has launched a policy lab to double down and broaden their policy push at a critical point in the national discourse in crypto policy. The reason I bring this up is because I've long said, and I think I mentioned this on the refuel, that we need to be much more active in policy circles around the world, in government circles around the world, and regulatory circles around the world. And the best position players to do this are the people with money, because at the end of the day, the way you get access to these politicians, to these regulators, is through, they call them donations, but we all know that they're not, the other word that they actually are, but that's how you get access. Okay, so if that's how you get access, who has the money in this industry? Well, it's the VCs, right? The VCs have so much money. So why don't they put themselves front and center and be the ones that educates these regulators? Because the VCs also have a lot of domain expertise, because they actively invest within this ecosystem and they know exactly what this ecosystem is about. So they're best positioned to do this, as well as things like centralized exchanges like Coinbase, for example. Those two entities alone, or those two categories, centralized exchanges or legitimate centralized exchanges, I should say, and legitimate VCs, because there are a lot of illegitimate VCs, are best positioned to not only have the money, but also the expertise to educate the policymakers, the lawmakers, the regulators, the politicians, all about crypto, and to make sure that we get favorable crypto legislation and regulation pushed through, whether it be in the US or Europe or Asia or India or the Middle East, wherever it is in the world. We obviously want favorable regulation pushed through. But the battleground definitely right now is the US, because crypto is so US centric. Europe seems to be a lot more progressive here. Even Hong Kong and China more broadly are very progressive. And other places are in Asia, such as Singapore as well, have become a bit of a crypto hub. Other places in the Middle East as well, like Dubai, for example. India is kind of back and forth. It seems like they are progressive in some areas, but regressive in others. But generally, it's a worldwide thing. So, as I said, the best positions groups in the crypto industry for kind of doing these sorts of stuff are the legitimate VCs and legitimate centralized exchanges. So, if you want to learn more about Paradigm's Policy Lab, you can check out this tweet thread. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so. All right, Stephen Goldfeder, one of the co-founders of Off-Chain Labs, put out a big tweet today that I'm not going to read through, discussing licensing when it comes to layer 2s. Now, the crux of this thread, or the TLDR, is basically him comparing the licensing of Arbitrum and Optimism, and how in the Optimism ecosystem, the licensing is more around something called the law of chains, where essentially you implicitly agree to some kind of social licensing when you join the Optimism ecosystem and become part of the superchain. Whereas with Arbitrum, the licensing is a bit different, where essentially what they want you to do is that if you're building an L2 using Arbitrum's technology, then essentially you need to give back to the Arbitrum ecosystem, and you need to be given a license by like the DAO, for example, in order to use Arbitrate technology in a commercial kind of environment as an L2. But if you're an L3 in Arbitrum and you're building an L3 on Arbitrum 1, for example, there's no licensing needed there. And he used the analogy of amusement parks here, and there's two different models of amusement parks, where essentially in the first park you pay a large entrance free, but all rides are included. And in the second park, the admission is free, but once inside, you'll have to pay if you want to go on a ride, right? So there's just two different kind of ways of looking at this. So you can go check out his full tweet for a full breakdown of this. It's really great. I recommend reading it. But generally, licensing in the crypto ecosystem has been a point of contention, I think, ever since Uniswap v3 had the business license on it. But I've said this on the refuel before, and I'll say it again. The spirit of open source, to me, is not taking someone's code and basically redeploying it and then monetizing it and not giving anything back. That is not the spirit of open source. The spirit of open source is that, hey, you develop something, you've put the source out there because you want people to actually build it with you, and you want people to contribute to it with you, and you want people to improve it with you from all around the world. But you don't want people just to take your code and go monetize it elsewhere and then leave you with nothing, basically. So the kind of Arbitrum approach, as I said, is basically that if you want to use Arbitrum's code, their layer 2 code here, you basically have to give back to the ecosystem before you can openly use it. And then with the Uniswap v3 license, for example, it's a business license that has an expiry date where the source is available, but they don't want someone coming along and saying, oh, I can just like take Uniswap v3's code, redeploy it as something else, and essentially monetize it and make a bunch of money off of it and cause all this drama as well. Because, I mean, this was in direct reaction to the fact that with Uniswap v2, there were plenty of forks of it, most famously SushiSwap, where essentially SushiSwap was the direct fork of Uniswap v2. They just did liquidity mining with the new Sushi token. They gave nothing back to the Uniswap ecosystem, and they just used the code and profited off of it, and they didn't build any of it, right? So that's the kind of example that I like to give. And that's where my stance is where I believe everything should have its source available, but I have no problem with restrictive licenses that essentially mean that, hey, you should not be just using this and profiting off of this if you haven't done any work for it, right? You should, if you want to profit off of this, you should give back. That is the spirit of open source to me. The spirit isn't just like taking the code and profiting off of it. At least that's my opinion on these things. Some people may have different opinions on it, but as I said, I'm strictly also in the camp of things being source available where you can actually still see the source code to obviously audit it yourself for bugs, or to audit it to know what the kind of, if there's a multi-sig, or what the time delay on upgrades are, things like that. That should be available, but the code should not be available just for people to come along, take it, monetize it, profit off of it without doing anything to give back. And I think that that's the right approach. But anyway, you can go read Steven's full tweet for yourself. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so. Alright, so Middle March here on Twitter, the creator of the Ethscriptions protocol, has introduced something called DumbSwap today. So DumbSwap is a decentralized exchange built on the Ethscriptions VM using dumb contracts. DumbSwap lets you swap tokens, provide liquidity, and earn yield, all without using a single smart contract, which makes DumbSwap much cheaper than normal decentralized exchanges. Now, this caught my eye because I'm like, that's pretty cool. I don't think this has been done before, and I was wondering how this kind of is achieved. And Middle March actually explains this in the tweet thread here. He goes, how does DumbSwap work without smart contracts? When you send an Ethscriptions VM transaction, you send a JSON Ethscriptions address to address 0. These payloads provide enough info for any observer to reconstruct the entire VM state using only on-chain data and deterministic rules. And these rules, of course, are open sourced in this repo, and you can use it to run your own indexer and verify that everything on DumbSwap is correct. So that's a pretty cool and ingenious way of doing it, and doing it that way means that all dumb contracts by nature are decentralized because all their data is stored on Ethereum and the state is inferred using deterministic open source software. Everyone has the same knowledge and power. You can see here a bit of an explanation about more how this works and how to get involved with it. So I'll link this in the YouTube description below. But this is the kind of stuff and the kind of innovation that I want to be seeing out of the DeFi space. As I've said before, the DeFi innovation is a bit few and far between these days. There is some stuff going on, but a lot of stuff is really just more of the same, and that's not a bad thing, mind you. More of the same is actually good for growth. But if we want to get another kind of 0 to 1 innovation within the DeFi space, we obviously need to keep experimenting with different things, and that's exactly what Middle March has done here with DumbSwap and with Ethscriptions more generally as well. So you can go check out this tweet thread for yourself that goes into more detail about this. But I think on that note, that's going to be it for today. So thank everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks, everyone.